I think, and because I'm still playing with this idea for my book about boys and men, about this indoctrination
Yeah.
process, and so I,
I'd love to hear more about that. I'd love to hear because it's crazy how how my fiction novel really does tie in with what you're trying to achieve with your nonfiction book.
yeah, this one concept, I'm gonna fumble through it, and we'll see where it gets to. So the
Okay.
idea that, I'm not sure if you heard, there's a concept out in the world called like the man box, where like there's all these things that men are expected to be to prove themselves to be men, and they're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
They're ridiculous. It's impossible to even have
Mm-hmm.
10% of what's in that box. But I
Mm-hmm.
think in a concept I'm starting to craft is this idea that it's more of a man cage, because all of these
Mm-hmm.
things you can't actually be. The only thing that you
Mm-hmm.
actually take away from the ridiculous, uh, I guess, ridiculous ceiling that it's set for men is that don't act like a girl and don't be gay. And so you're in this
Mm-hmm.
cage in that you can't actually do anything else, because you're always
Mm-hmm.
only limited by those two main things. And so
Mm-hmm.
in teaching boys that, it's essentially like extracting the humanity from them, because if they can't have
Yeah.
sadness or fear or vulnerability, you also can't have love and give love and receive love, because it feels either like you're acting like a girl or you're gay. And so you live
Yeah.
your whole life, and that, like, we don't turn boys into men, we shame them from boys into men. And so if you live your
Mm-hmm.
whole life thinking that you can't do any of the things that are natural, like loving, like being
Mm-hmm.
sensitive, like, like feeling
Mm-hmm.
pain, then you kind
Mm-hmm.
of don't know how to exist in the world. And then unfortunately these
Yeah.
boys, which become men, end up gravitating to people, for better or for worse, that tell them how to be men. And so
Yeah.
you end up, if you're unfortunately around nefarious people, like an Andrew Tate sort of character, then
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
start thinking like, well, fine, this person is telling me very clearly what I need to do to be a
Yeah.
man, so that's what I'm going to do. Obviously the hard part is that it's the most basic version of traditional masculinity, and it ends up hurting them a lot more, just like extremism would. But they want to feel
Yeah.
accepted, but they don't anywhere, because they really can't do the basics of their life, which is like giving love and receiving love. So that's my idea of how someone ends up with these
Mm-hmm.
awful characters, which on the
Mm-hmm.
extreme end is, people like you're the Reds organization.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's fascinating. I think it's such an important topic, and I'm just it's so important. It's so important, especially because I have a young son who's 4, and he's a very sensitive little guy. And my my biggest goal in life is to raise him in a way that he can feel all of those emotions and experience them and maintain that sensitivity. And because I think the world needs more of that, and I
Yeah.
think I think you're so right how formative these concepts can be in shaping who these boys become when they do turn into men, and how it influences even their friendships,
Oh yeah.
and how, for example, like the relationship that I have with my friends are so different than the relationship my husband has with his friends. And I think I think it doesn't give him as much richness in his life as it gives me, for example.
Yeah, I completely agree. Through this process, I've been trying to lead from the front with my friends, and all of them have really stepped up as what their capacity allows. Telling each other we love each other
Yes.
more and being there for each other. But like, I really find it's difficult, and a lot of men, as they get older, kind of limit themselves from saying like, I'm having a real tough time right now. Like they feel
Yeah.
guilty to say like, my
Yeah.
wife and I are going through this terrible thing, because it makes them seem weak, and all of these things, where
Yeah.
like the idea is that like everyone goes through these things with relationships, and like, and that's one of the main things, like, because I would never say that like women's relationships are better than men, because I think they're totally different. And
Yes.
but one thing that male relationships are definitely missing is that like sometimes you really don't feel like your friends have your back, because they're so cut
Yeah.
off from themselves and their friendships. So like women like use their friendships as support and strength, and kind
Exactly.
of men
Yep.
become totally divorced from the closeness they have as boys. Like the friendship with boys,
Mm-hmm.
there's interviews and studies of how like how emotional and verbose boys are when they're talking about their friendships, and how I would die without my friends and all of these things. And
Mm-hmm.
like they kind of just lose that over time because of how we
Mm-hmm.
define friendships. So eventually they just don't feel safe around men anymore. I didn't expect to
Yeah.
be completely kind of devastatedly sad for what we do to boys in most
Yeah.
cultures because of these things. So like I don't have any kids, but like
Yeah.
I completely understand your
Yeah.
like focus on wanting to keep that, that beauty in your son.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just sitting with everything you've said. And, I also think another big part of that is that I think for women, some of these, I think like there's certain aspects of relationships that women have that are practiced more. So for example, like we get together, we talk about everything all the time, all of our emotions, our anxieties, our fears, like, everything from like sex to, our kids to our own personal histories. And, some of my friends I've grown up with, so they've seen me grow and evolve. And and the same with my husband. He has friends who he's grown up with, but because as groups of women, I think we practice conversation and vulnerability every day, every time we're
Right.
together. And I don't think that happens as often. Like my husband, whenever he hears like all the things we talked about, he's like, oh, I never talk about that with my
Yeah,
friends.
never. Yeah.
Never. And I think it's because it's just not practice. Like I think that to your point, because it wasn't, maybe that's because it wasn't demonstrated for them. Maybe it's because men have been, boys have been caged at such a young age where they haven't had the ability to really stretch those muscles. And so they don't even know how to use them. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's part of it. Like I don't think there's really that many studies on this, but like I think there is a
Mhm.
slight biological component to it. Like where I think women are more conditioned for community building and things like that. But if we look how
Mhm.
boys like come out of the womb, like they're more fussy than girls. Do you know what I mean? Like they are
Mhm.
more sensitive. They need a lot of love. And unfortunately, we
Yeah.
treat a lot of boys in society like they're going to grow up into emotionally stunted men. And so it becomes this vicious circle that like if
Yeah.
they're not mirrored the same thing from their caregivers that the parents would do or teachers would do to the daughters. And these are like
Yeah.
well-intentioned parents. These aren't, I'm not talking about like really hardcore traditional masculine sort of parents. This is just like, well, this
Yeah.
is a girl, she's delicate, so we're going to teach her, treat her with love, and if she cries, we'll accept it. Or if a boy does it, we need to make him strong for the world, so we're going to deny him these feelings. Like it's yeah,
Mhm.
it's really
Mhm.
messed up. And so I
It
don't know
is.
exactly, I don't think anyone knows exactly the reason why it's so the friendships are so desperate, or
Yeah.
disparate,
Yeah.
however you want to say that word.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I think a lot of it more than we accept is from just socialization.